Hi, everyone. This is Evan Langert with the Langert Commercial Group, and I'd like to talk to you for a few minutes about redevelopment clauses in leases. They're becoming more and more prevalent, and any tenant that's looking to sign a lease ought to be mindful of the effects of these clauses. First, let me get into the definition. What is a redevelopment clause? Well, a redevelopment clause is a clause in a lease where if the landlord decides to redevelop its project, whether it's a shopping center, an office building, or some other type of project, they can send written notice to their tenants, usually about 60 days. And at the end of that 60-day period, the tenant has to close up and vacate the premises. And the landlord then proceeds to demolish the premises and the entire project and to build whatever it wants to build. So first, why do landlords want these clauses? Well, we all know that shopping centers get old and tired and office buildings get old and tired. Some that I'm thinking of off the top of my head were built in the 1950s and 1960s. And the areas around them have grown up to where they're far more dense, a lot more people, and the income of the people is a lot more in a couple of these areas. So when that happens, a landlord looks at it, and sometimes zoning changes along with it. And a landlord looks at it and says, well, I've got an old tired shopping center and I'm getting this amount of rent, but I could knock this thing down and I could build a brand new state-of-the-art shopping center with maybe 5 or 6 stories above it of high-end luxury condos or perhaps high-end office. And so landlord can make a whole lot more money with a project like that if the area around it supports it. And often these areas do. So without these clauses, you might have tenants in a shopping center or an office building that have a 5-year lease or a 10-year lease, or in some cases a 20-year lease. And they might have, 2 or 3 or 4 or 5-year options after that to renew the lease. So if a landlord wants to redevelop a shopping center, it can get very expensive. Once a tenant figures out that the landlord wants to redevelop a shopping center and that they're standing in the landlord's way and that the landlord's going to make a lot of money with this new project, tenants tend to try to hold up landlords for large payouts, and it can be very costly. And so sometimes the project gets stopped in its tracks and the landlord just waits out the leases until they expire, or most of them, so that it gets less expensive to buy out the remaining tenants. So that's why a landlord would want them. Why would a tenant not want them? Well, a lot of that's obvious. You've just moved into a shopping center. Maybe you spent 250 or 500,000 or maybe $1 million or more to build out your storefront or to build out your law office or your high-end office. And you've just gotten established. People are just starting to realize, oh, okay, this restaurant or this retail business or this law firm or this title company are located here, and you're getting yourself known in the area. And then here comes a notice that says in 60 days, you have to shut down and move out. That's a hardship on a business. You have to find another spot. 60 days isn't much notice. You couldn't find a new spot, generally speaking, and build it out and sign a lease and do all the things you need to do to move into that spot. So generally some downtime and sometimes some significant downtime happens. But there are problems on another level with these types of clauses for a tenant. These clauses, when they're in the lease, typically just say what I just said. They give you 60 days notice and you're gone. There's no language in there about any compensation to the tenant for having to move or for any downtime, for any moving costs. And if you just spent $1 million a year ago to build out your space and they decide they want to redevelop the project, then you've just lost the better part of $1 million. If you had a 10-year lease and you've been in there for 1 year, well, then 90% of the money that you spent to build out the space is unamortized. So tenants generally don't want that. As with a lot of different clauses that put grave hardships on tenants, my first line of defense is to wipe them out entirely, just scratch them out of the lease. Sometimes I'm successful doing that. Sometimes the landlord holds fast and says, no, I want the right to redevelop my shopping center. So at that point, a tenant has a decision to make. They either decide, I don't want this and I'm going to move on to some other location, or perhaps this is a great location or there aren't any other locations out there that really are on a level with this particular location and you want to go there. Well, if you choose to go there and they won't take the clause out of the lease, the next level is to try to ease the pain on the tenant, if you're the tenant, of course. And so you do that by saying, okay, so I've got a 10-year lease and I've spent $1 million building this space out. So on an amortization schedule, a straight amortization schedule, that's $100,000 a year. So one, you can't kick me out for the first 2 or 3 years of this lease or some other number because I need to get established. And then the other thing is when you do kick me out, you're going to pay me the unamortized portion. So if you can't kick me out for 3 years and the amortization is at $100,000 per year, and you kick me out right after the 3 years is up, then $300,000 of my $1 million build out costs have been amortized, but $700,000 have not. So, Mr. or Ms. Landlord, you're going to have to pay me $700,000. You're also going to have to pay me my moving costs. And if the negotiation stance is such that you have enough power, you might want to get compensated for your downtime, or the time that you're going to not be in a space at all, having to move to some other space. So there's part art and part science to these things. As with almost any clause, it's a balancing of the interests and the bargaining power of landlord and tenant. As with all my videos, this is not intended to give any specific legal advice to any tenant or to any landlord. Your case is your case. It's different than everybody else's case, and it needs its attention specifically. If you want to talk about your particular lease or redevelopment clauses in your particular lease, give me a call. I'm at 443-529-0505. That's 443-529-0505. Or you can email me. I'm at elangert@thelangertgroup.com. That's elangert@thelangertgroup.com. Elangert is E-L-A-N as in Nathan, G-E-R-T as in Thomas. As always, have a great day and God bless.